Alrighty, so today's episode is entitled My Three Amigos. And if you've ever paid attention to anything that I've ever posted before, if you've seen any of my other social media, you know that I have three children. If you've paid attention to a previous podcast, a previous episode rather, you know that I've already said that I have three children. So I have three children. I conceived, carried, and birthed three sons. And that significance of me saying sons will become important later on. And I will say this, if you hear any noise in the background, I got a couple of things going on, one of which is laundry, the other of which is my puppy, who of all the toys that she has, she absolutely loves playing with an empty water bottle. So you may hear her crinkling the water bottle. So yes, I conceived, carried, and birthed three children, three sons. None of those pregnancies were easy. Not one. Not one. And at some point, I was on bed rest with each of those pregnancies. With my oldest, I was 19 years old when I had him. I was away at college when I realized that I was pregnant. I had graduated high school the summer of '88. The colleges that I wanted to go to, and honestly, I wasn't sure which college I wanted to go to. I just knew that I wanted to get away from home. I didn't have to leave the state, but I wanted to be far enough away where I didn't have to deal with my mom, since I did make the decision not to go into the military, which was heavy on my mind up until actual signing day. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing it. So anyway, I started my college career, and I call it a career because I've been to several different colleges over several different years. And I started my college career at one of our city colleges, one of our community colleges. Every state, I believe, has a set or series of community colleges. And in Chicago, we have a collective of community colleges, and they're all called City Colleges of Chicago, but then they each have their individual names. So anyway, I start my college career at one of the community colleges, and met my oldest son's father, and he and I dated for a good portion of the time that I was there. But I didn't want to be serious with him, or anyone for that matter, because I knew that I was going away for the winter semester. I started my fall semester, like I said, at the community college, but I knew that I was going away for the winter. I was going down to SIU Carbondale for the winter and spring sessions. So I did not intend to stay connected to him for any length of time beyond that fall. I had no intention of that. Yes, we were dating. Yes, we had gotten involved with one another. Yes, we had had sex. And believe it or not, yes, we used protection each and every time. And when I tell you this, I mean it in all seriousness, in all honesty. We used a condom each and every time. And each and every time that condom broke. It broke so much that I thought that maybe he was puncturing holes in the condom. So I started buying the condoms and putting them on him myself. And they still broke. So I like to look at it as my oldest child was meant to be here, whether it was my intention for him to be here or not. He was meant to be here. So I go away to school. I started dating this other guy. And actually, before I went away to school, I started dating someone else. I left my son's father alone. Didn't realize that I was pregnant. I started dating someone else. Actually, two different guys. and no, one guy. And he and I only dated for a hot sec. I mean, he was a cute little guy that I met on the train. He was much thinner than I ever found myself attracted to, and he was a pretty boy. He was so pretty. And he did eventually, one of the things that he wanted to do was get into the entertainment field. He wanted to be a singer, he wanted to be a model, and he wanted to get into acting. And he did end up being a singer. He ended up being, and I won't say the name of the group, but he did end up being a part of a well-known group that's well known not because of the group itself, but because of who the lead singer was, and the fact that that lead singer went solo, and in his going solo developed a controversial following, to which right now today he is in prison for. He made tremendous amounts of money making hits, and because he was a Chicago native, Chicago has backed him tremendously, even though he was wrong all the way. And I also personally know him because his mother and my mother were classmates at one point in time, and then realized later that they had a familial connection. So anyway, I started dating this guy who became a part of a well-known group, but well-known because of who their lead singer was. So I dated him for a hot sec, knew that I wasn't going to be, really deeply involved with him either, because I knew that I was going away to school, away to, again, SIU Carbondale. So I ended my relationship with him. I went away to school, started dating someone else, found out that the person that I was dating away at school was hot. And when I say hot, I mean hot not in a good way. And I came back home for spring break and found out that I was pregnant, but I found out that I was pregnant because I had to be tested because I was having some kind of I was having an issue in the genital area, and that's how I found out that I was hot, because the person that I was dating was hot. But then at the same time, I also found out that I was pregnant with my oldest son, and that led me to immediately being put on medication, and then eventually bed rest. I went back to school. I let that person know that they gave me a disease, and they denied it the whole time, which pissed me off, because I realized that I saw this person taking medication, and I asked the person what the medication was for, and they were never honest about it. So I left that person alone, finished out my time at that school, horribly so, came back home to Chicago, reconnected with a couple of different people, decided that I couldn't be with them. It was just too much pressure. Finally told my oldest son's father that I was pregnant, because I didn't want anything to do with him at all, but I knew that if I did not tell him that I was pregnant with his child, I was not depriving him, but I was depriving my child of knowing who his paternal side was. So did that. It did not work out. Before my child turned a year old, we were no longer together, and reconnected with a high school friend. He and I became a couple. We had a child together. We eventually married, and then we had a third child together. So the first child is with a different father. My second and my third are with my ex-husband. My second child was conceived when my ex-husband came home for winter break. He was away at school in Tennessee, came home for winter break. I got pregnant when he came home, did not realize it until after the fact. Of course, he went back to school. I found out that I was pregnant, let him know, and that was a situation. And then we did eventually, get it together. We got engaged. We eventually got married. And then I had our third child, my third child, our second together. And I was under so much stress with that child. Now, my first one, I was on bed rest because I was sick. The second one, I was on bed rest. He did eventually make me sick. My body just reacted weirdly to my pregnancies. So I did end up on bed rest with him. And I ended up developing migraines with that child as well. But they came after I gave birth. The migraines hit after I gave birth. So whatever it was that he was adding to my body when I birthed him, he took that thing away and migraines developed. But I ended up on bed rest with him because of stress, the stress that his father had put me under. And then with my third one, I was also under a lot of stress with that child, and ended up on bed rest. This child would have me craving and eating things that he would then make me throw up. So one of the things that I craved with him was spaghetti and Pepsi. That combination, spaghetti and Pepsi. I could not have Pepsi without spaghetti. I could not have spaghetti without Pepsi. That child had me craving spaghetti and Pepsi. And when I tell you, I threw it up every single time. I threw it up every single time. I actually lost weight with that child, with that pregnancy, because I was throwing up so much. I would eat whatever it was that the child wanted me to eat, and then I would throw it back up. My third pregnancy, my third birth, my third child was also my biggest child. I had a 7'2", a 7'5", and then a 9'9". 7'2", 7'5", and then 9'9". We jumped the eights. Eight what? For who? No. 9'9". 9 pounds, 9 ounces. My biggest child, my sickest pregnancy. Again, I actually lost weight with that pregnancy as well. And this was the child that made it very clear to me that the spirit world absolutely existed. And when I say the spirit world, I don't mean as in the ghost or anything like that. I mean that the Father created a world that we could connect to if we tapped into our own intuitive powers. There are some of us who are equipped to see and hear things that only God allows us to see and hear. And I have always been one of those connected people. And I have found that actually, and I think all three of my children are, but specifically my first and my third, they are also able to connect to the spirit world. And it is a blessing and it is a curse. And before I go any further, let me put this disclaimer on here, and I'll say it so that it's clear this time. I do not see ghosts. I do not deal with clairvoyancy. I do not subscribe to the witchcraft of it all. That is not what I'm talking about here. There are some of us that God has equipped to be more sensitive to the spirit world and allows us the gift of seeing and hearing things that the average person would not be able to. And they may be able to, they're just not as sensitive as we are. There is the gift of prophecy. And in order to be able to prophetically speak to someone, you have to be tapped into the spirit world in a way that the average person, the average Christian, would not be able to tap into it, at least on a consistent basis. The same is with being able to connect with the spirit world. You are able to tap into in a way that the average person would not be able to. So that aside, I am not a witch. I do not practice witchcraft. I do not No, there is no such thing as that in my life. I don't do that. I am a Christian. I am a God girl. I believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, who is my comfort. But that I say that my third child solidified that for me, because my third child was able to connect to his deceased great grandmother and basically bring her about. He would have literally conversations with her, and we were like, who is he talking to? And we would actually ask him, who are you talking to? And he would say, I'm talking to Nanny. Now that is what all of the grandchildren and great grandchildren called her. They called her Nanny. So that is who he was talking to. He would sit in his crib and hum. He would sit in his crib and sing. He had an Elmo chair that he would pull to his crib, pull it into the crib, and watch Sesame Street or any of the little cartoons that I would put on him that were educational, including Veggie Tales, because it was all about the Bible. So he would pull his chair into the crib and sit and be entertained by that. But he would also have conversations with his nanny. And that is also the child that, as he began to get older and mature and come more into himself, posed a great deal of issues for me. Now, again, I gave birth to 3 children, and I knew that I would be a good mother. I have the motherly instinct. I am fine with children. I'm even good with my grandchildren, which sometimes I wonder if I can be, because sometimes I feel a little disconnected from them. But that's only because I don't treat them like babies. I treat them like people, like little people, mature. I don't speak to them in the whole, I speak to my dog in the little baby voice. I don't speak to the babies, the grandbabies, that way, because I want them to be able to develop their vocabulary, and it's kind of hard to do when you're, oh yeah, can't do it that way. So I knew that I would be a good mother. But my children, specifically my bookends, my first and my third, are the ones that caused me to question whether I would be a good mother. My middle one was, I won't say that he was the good child, because all of my children were good when I really think about it. They were all good. But he was the one that caused me the least amount of stress up until he got to high school. And then it was a whole different situation then. But my bookends, my first and my third, those are the ones that caused me the most stress, because the first one had ADD, and in addition to ADD, there was a little bit of an additional learning disability. Not necessarily dyslexia, but it was difficult for him to read and then comprehend what he had read. It was difficult for him to grasp math 100%. He did better in reading and comprehension than he did with math, but he did have his delays, and I don't know what caused it. I don't know if it's a familiar thing, or if it's, when I say familiar, I mean in the family, it's a genetic thing, or if it was something that happened because of the medications that I had to take when I was first pregnant with him, or if it's because, I don't know. So he brought me a set of issues that I can't say I wasn't familiar with, because my brother also has the delays, the comprehensive delays. So I was used to, or familiar with, I won't say used to, familiar with delays in male children. It wasn't a strange thing for me. But, however, it was strange because for my brother, once he was tired of being in the midst of the confusion that was who he was, he left. He picked up and left and started living in the streets and doing what he wanted to do in the streets. The difference was with my child, there was no leaving. This is my child, and I have to be able to deal with and grasp what's going on with this child and find a game plan for how to help him. So we did that. And I will say that one of those components in the game plan, one of those pieces in the game plan was medication. Medication was not a good thing for him. And we tried different brands, name brands, and we tried different dosages. And he went from being a happy, jovial, active child to being a lump on a log. Plain and simple. He would not move once he was medicated. He would just sit there. He was a vegetable. Sit there. And I could not stand that. I could not stand it, because you went from being a very lively and active child to being someone who had no desire to even move. Never mind no desire to get up and bathe or eat. You just didn't want to move. So I decided that medication was not the way to go with him. My middle child did not cause that issue. Did not have that issue. He, yes, was hyper. He, yes, was active. But he also had a creative outlet. He liked to draw. So drawing was the way that he exerted that energy when everything else didn't seem to make sense to him. My third one, however, had ADD as well, ADHD. But his comprehensive levels were compounded by his life choice as well. And I say life choice because even though, and this has always been my thought, even though you are born one way or another, you still have a choice in how you choose and how you live your life. And especially once you're educated. And it wasn't that I cared about the different lifestyle. I didn't. Still my child. I'm going to love you regardless. It was the blatancy, the disrespect that this child insisted on participating in order to get the point across that I am not like the other two. So my children posed some challenges for me. They posed some difficulties for me, and taking care of them was not the easiest thing, especially since I did it majorly on my own. Even when I was married, I did it majorly on my own, and I don't regret any bit of it. I don't regret any part of it. Now, I will go deeper into each of these children at a different time, but I did want to introduce the children to you because I will at some point be speaking about them later, probably intermingled with the meat of this whole podcast and why I initially started this podcast. So they will show up later, but I did this whole 10 series, this whole 10 episodes is really like an introduction into each component, each person, or each group of people that I've taken care of before I get into the meat of why I am having a caregivers crash, or how that came about. This gives you a precursor into all of that. So those are my three amigos, and I call them my three amigos because they were all three male. They all three, their names begin with M. That was not intentional, but then at the same time, I did not try to stop it. I gave my oldest son his father's first and last name. I did not name my middle child. My middle child was named by his father, my ex-husband. And then I thought it would be funny if we named the third one this name. And when I actually gave birth, we didn't have any other options. We hadn't really considered any other names. So that's how he ended up with his name. So yeah, those are my three amigos. Those are my three children. Those are and I'm so very proud of each and every one of them because they have turned out to be some wonderful adults. And I am grateful for the time that I had raising them, the time that I had caring for them. It was not the easiest, again, because I did it majorly on my own, especially even when, rather, I was married. It was not the easiest. I did have help in the sense that my grandparents were there because, again, we all lived in the same building. So I did have some help while I went to work and while I went to school. But for the most part, I raised those children on my own. Even after I married the second time, my current husband had some say in how I interacted or dealt with them or even disciplined them, but not as much as he would have liked to have had, because he wasn't familiar with or even cared for how I did connect with my children. My current husband, is rough, to say the least, and his filter is almost non-existent, and I tend to deal with my children on a level of, I want you to understand what's happening and why it's not okay, and then this is the consequence of it. I am an action reaction kind of person. I am an action consequence kind of person, but I also want you to understand it. Now, have I ever had to physically discipline my children? Absolutely, and that is my personal choice. Was it ever to the degree of what my mother did to me? Nope. Not even close. Not even close. What my mother did to me, she could have been locked up for. Plain and simple. DCFS should have taken me away from my mother. Had they known all of the things that she had done to me as far as discipline is concerned, to the point of me passing out on one occasion, having to go to the hospital, and then the staff being told, yeah, I beat her, and nothing being done. Nothing being done. I should have been taken away from my mother, but I was not. I did not ever do to my children as much as my mother did to me. Not ever. And that is why, because what she did to me was basically abuse. I won't even say borderline. It was basically abuse. And I never wanted that for my children. Physical discipline, yes, you would get that. I would tap you. Absolutely. I would yell at you. Absolutely. But would I ever take it to the extreme the way that my mother did? Not at all. Actually, I take that back. I did it one time, and my child understood full well why it went to that extreme. Full well why it went to that extreme. So, but the physical discipline, yes, it was there. The verbal discipline, yes, it was there. Did they have punishments and restrictions and they could do this, that, or the other? Absolutely they did. Absolutely. Yes, they did. And I don't regret any part of it. I don't regret raising my children. I don't regret having my children. I celebrate the fact that I had my children when I did. Initially, I did regret it. Initially, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a young mother. Oh, what are people going to think? Because again, I was 19 when I had my first. It was literally, he was born literally a week before my 20th birthday. To the date, a week before my 20th birthday. I had him one day. 7 days later, I turned 20. And I did initially regret it because I was like, okay, I was supposed to go to college. I was supposed to start my career. I was supposed to do this, that, and the other. But as I got older and began to appreciate the fact that I could still do those things while having a children. Yeah, it would be a little bit harder. Yeah, it would be a little bit more difficult. Yeah, it would take a little bit longer, but I could still get it done. Then I began to say, you know what? It's all right that I had my kids as early as I did, especially since my last one will be gone before I turn 50. And sure enough, my last one was gone before I turned 50. Now, did that child have to come back? Yes, briefly. But now that child is on her own with her fiance and their 3 dogs, doing pretty decent. And that is a little bit of a clue as to what that child had me go through as she developed. So, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.